Hey guys, it's Ryan with JanitorLeads.com, and I'm sitting here with one of my daughters here in Park City, Utah. As I mentioned, our mission with JanitorLeads.com is to help small businesses grow to $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $20 million. So you have the same awesome opportunity that I have to retire at a young age and live the life that you deserve to live with your family. So I'm coming here from Park City, Utah today. Last week we spoke about the importance of focusing and simplifying your business. Specifically, we talked about how the best companies in the world like Southwest Airlines, Costco, Quick Trip focus more on what not to do as opposed what to do. And so if you subscribe to these videos below, over the next several weeks, I'm going to be going over specific industries and how you can service those industries as a janitorial service provider. This week, I'm going to be talking about restaurant cleaning. And if you can stick to the end of the video, we're going to be sharing with you some pretty awesome tips that you're going to be able to use to really blow away those chefs when you're cleaning those restaurants. So one thing that's really, really important to know about restaurants is that every single restaurant wants something different. So if you're not careful and if you aren't extremely focused on exactly what you do and more specifically what you don't want to do, you're going to become a jack of all trades in a restaurant and a master of none. And you will get yourself tied up in circles, running around like crazy, working 7 days a week. So that's why it's really, really important to know what you're going to do in a restaurant and what you're not going to do. In fact, even in specific restaurant concepts that I serviced, for example, some major restaurant chains, one restaurant for example, Phoenix, wants a certain thing, and the exact same chain of the restaurant in Scottsdale wants something completely different. So it's really, really important that you focus on what you're not going to do when you're servicing restaurants. So let's talk about the different areas within a restaurant. So there's the front of the house, which is FOH, or abbreviated as FOH, which is usually like the dining room. Sometimes it includes the bar, it's the restrooms, those types of things. And then there's the back of the house, which is BOH, which is really the kitchen. That's the area that most customers don't see. And there's different players within a restaurant as well. So there's going to be the general manager, and the general manager is usually the one that's going to sign the contract for you. From my experience, general managers usually don't get into the weeds very much. They're going to rely specifically on what their employees are telling them. So a general manager might have a specific pet peeve, but once you sign the contract, you probably won't deal with the general manager very much unless there's going to be a problem. And then there's going to be the chef. Now, unlike the general manager, the chefs are usually very, very specific on what they want. They're usually very, very particular, very picky, can be very cranky. You're going to be dealing with them all the time. I mean, they can call you at 4 a.m. when they arrive if they're not happy with their work. So, although the general manager signs this contract, the chef is going to be the one that allows you to keep the contract or not keep the contract. So let's get into the specific areas within the restaurant. So let's talk about the front of the house. So the front of the house is usually the area that you see as a patron within that restaurant. So a lot of companies can focus on the front of the house because it is actually quite easy to do. It's most typical to or relatable to office cleaning. It's usually sweeping the floors, mopping the floors, cleaning the restrooms, and this type of work is generally pretty simple when it comes to janitorial. It doesn't really require any specialized equipment, unless you're going to come in and clean the windows, which you kind of do on maybe a weekly or a monthly basis, and you can bring in a window team to do that. So if you're going to get into restaurants, the easiest way to start is the front of the house. The problem with that is that most companies service the front of the house themselves. They service them with bussers and wait staff who are kind of already on the clock, and they don't typically outsource the front of the house only. Although you can really specialize in that and just pick the restaurants that do focus on outsourcing that component of it. Be careful when you're getting into the front of the house aspects when you're getting into nightclubs. Nightclubs can be really difficult when it comes to the front of the house because you can get lots of spills. You can get beer stains. You can get confetti that sticks into the floor. So a typical restaurant front of the house is quite easy, but if you get into a nightclub front of the house, it can be really quite extensive. Now let's talk about the other area of the front of the house, which is the bar. So usually the bar is included with the back of the house, but it's important to talk about. So when you're cleaning the bar, you're talking about cleaning the mats, which I'll get into a little bit more specifically when I get into the kitchen. You're talking about sweeping the floor, mopping the floor. Sometimes they'll have you clean and wipe down the equipment. Usually the bartenders are going to be wiping down the bar tops, and usually when you're cleaning the bar, you're usually just focusing on the floors. It can be a little bit tricky because the drains in the floor can get clogged. A lot of times they may want you to pull out equipment, which can be a little bit labor intensive. The hardest thing I found about cleaning bars is when they leave full brute barrels full of trash cans and full of beer bottles, and you have someone that's required to pull it out. It can become a workman's comp issue because it can get really heavy. You can hurt people's backs, so be careful about your scope of work when you're getting into the bars. Then there's the back of the house, which is the kitchen, and the kitchen is really typically where they're going to outsource. And it can be a lot of different things that you're doing in the kitchen. So really it's important to focus on what you want to do and what you don't want to do in a kitchen. So the kitchen, let's start with the floors. So usually the floors are going to be covered with mats. So the mats are one of the trickiest things in cleaning a restaurant. Number one, a lot of times there isn't a place to clean the mats. So be sure to ask where you can clean the mats. Do you have to pick up all the mats and haul them outside? Sometimes we have to haul them, it takes 5 minutes just to bring them outside. Is there a place to power wash them? Is it cold outside when you're cleaning the mats? Is there a sink that you have to clean these big mats in a tiny little mop sink? So really make sure you know what you're talking about before you clean the mats. And then there's the floors. So there's different types of floors. There's usually epoxy floors or there's tile floors. And the biggest issue with floors is that when restaurants outsource, they leave the floors a mess. So before you can even get to the floor, you got to spend hours sweeping it up. And a lot of times what happens is this food gets caught in the drains and you are responsible for clogs in the drains. Even though that it's not really your fault, they're going to blame you on that. So my suggestion, if you're going to be doing floors, make sure that the restaurant, you might want to ask them to pre-sweep it or make them responsible for sweeping it, so you can actually just be responsible for deck brushing and mopping the floors. Then it gets into things like the hoods. So hoods are above the equipment. The hoods can take a long time. You have to clean not only the outside, which is more like polishing it, but you got to actually take the filters down and degrease them, and that takes a really long time, and oftentimes they're really hot. So how are you going to degrease those hood filters? Then there's the walls. So the walls are either going to be stainless steel or white walls. So are you going to be responsible for polishing the walls? Do they want stainless steel polish or don't they want stainless steel polish? And then there's the equipment itself, and the equipment itself can be very specific. So there's fryers, there's flat grills, there's woks, there is flat tops. All these different types of equipment require very specific types of cleaning, degreasing, and it requires things like specialized chemicals like degreaser or oven cleaner or grill bricks. So again, before you go in and bid a kitchen, please make sure that you know exactly what you can and can't do, because it really can be a specialty. My suggestion, if you have any questions about cleaning kitchens, submit a comment below, and I'd be happy to answer that, because you can really go into detail on what is involved in a kitchen. So that's the back of the house. So now let's talk about restaurants in terms of pricing. So if you're just doing the front of the house, a restaurant cleaning can be very simple. It can be maybe $800 a month. It might be $1,500 a month. If we're talking about a nightclub, it could be quite a bit more. But the back of the house, the pricing usually starts to get quite expensive. So it can be as little as, maybe $1,500 a month, but we've cleaned kitchens where it's $10,000, $15,000 a month. So the pricing on restaurants can be very, very lucrative if you know what you're doing, but it can also be very, very expensive if you get in over your head. So my suggestion, if you have any questions on pricing the restaurants, would just to be submit a comment below, and I can definitely help you out with that. So some interesting things about restaurants, so that it can be positive and negative. So the positive thing is the chefs and the general managers within restaurants tend to move around a lot. So if you do an amazing job, restaurants you can really, really create a name for yourself, and you can really you can start one restaurant, the chef's going to move, you're going to start the next restaurant, and you can really build up a little empire for yourself in terms of restaurant cleaning. The other interesting thing about restaurants is that they can be very, very lucrative, but it can also be very expensive. There's things like you might accidentally unplug a refrigerator, which you could be responsible for spoilage. Restaurants are notorious for hating water on their equipment. Now, the easiest way to clean restaurant equipment involves water, but that's the last thing you should be doing, because you can short things out, especially when it comes into ovens. And we've had to pay tens of thousands of dollars to repair restaurant equipment, and that's not something that your insurance is going to cover. So again, restaurants can be really, really positive. You can build an empire for yourself in the restaurant cleaning business, because specifically not very many companies do it. I think in the Phoenix area specifically, there might be 2 or 3 companies that even do restaurant cleaning, but it is really hard work. Do you want to work 7 days a week? These are questions you want to ask yourself. Do you want to work 2 a.m., be done at 6 a.m.? Do you want to deal with chefs that are really, really jerks a lot of the time? Do you want to be on call 24/7? Those are questions you want to ask yourself. Now, some companies can really crush it in the restaurant cleaning business if they know exactly what they want to do. So for example, maybe you want to just go clean the front of the house. That's not a bad idea. Maybe you just say, I'm just going to do the floors in the back of the house. Maybe you're just going to do bars. Maybe you're just going to do one-time cleanings. Maybe you're just going to do equipment cleaning. So know exactly what you're going to do. Do not become a jack of all trades and a master of none. So when you get a bid or you're purchasing a lead for a restaurant cleaning, pick the specific types that you want, and when you go in, you educate the customer on exactly what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, and educate them on what you're not going to do and why you're not going to do it. And if they choose not to go with you, so be it. But in the end, you'll be super, super successful because you'll be able to create an awesome name for yourself. There's not many companies that do restaurant cleaning, and when you do what you do well, you're going to crush it. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned some specific tips that I was going to give you to help you kind of really, really crush it with your chefs. So the first one I wanted to give you was how to clean epoxy floors. So normally when we're cleaning restaurant floors, we're deck brushing it and then squeegeeing it into the drains. But with epoxy floors, the degreaser doesn't really work for that. So what you want to do is get some powdered detergent, some cheap powdered detergent from like Walmart. You sprinkle that on the floor, actually dry. Well, actually, first you mop the floor, you sprinkle the powdered detergent on it, and then you deck brush it, rinse it, and squeegee it. So that's how you're going to get the slip away from the floors in epoxy floor. And the other kind of cool tip that you can use, if you go to restaurants, you're going to see, in the kitchens, you're going to see these copper pipes, and these copper pipes get super, super tarnished. So if you're going into a restaurant and you're doing a bid, you're going to see tarnished pipes. What you can ask the chef to do right there, without even giving them a bid, you can say, hey, do you have any lemon juice? get some lemon juice or just some fresh lemon, squeeze it into a cup, take a rag and wipe off those copper pipes. Do that right in front of the chef, and you'll be able to turn those copper pipes into super shiny brand new copper with just some lemon juice and a rag. And oftentimes you can win that contract right there, just by showing your expertise. So remember to subscribe below. Submit any questions you have below regarding this video, or how to bid restaurants, or any questions that you might have on whether you should or shouldn't do restaurant cleaning. And I'll definitely be sure to answer those. And subscribe next week, and we're going to be going into some other industries that, if you're not into restaurant cleaning, we'll definitely go into other industries that might be able to help you out. Talk to you soon. Thanks.